Welcome to this week's edition or this week's episode of the Redacted Culture Cast. I am joined by a friend that I met in troubled times, but thank you for joining us. Frank, would you introduce yourself?
Hey, Frank Bito. Actually, we've known each other for better part of 4 years now. 4 years, I think.
I think it was roughly three through associates.
Yeah. So, you want my background and stuff?
I mean, a little bit. I think the reason why, you're definitely involved in this gun culture.
Yeah. So, I spent the better part of 10 years in the Army as from a Pathfinder to a PSD to just being airborne infantry, and then getting out, went to school, got a degree in criminal psychology. After the degree in criminal psychology was when I went to start contracting, which is obviously what got me into the field where you and me met. So started that in 2014. I've been doing it ever since. And then along the way, which is where training company started and my store started.
So at this point in time, I'll make the quick comma. Thank you for listening to the show. You know how to support Redacted by going to redactedllc.com. That's where you'll find our merch. By this time, our V2 shirts will be out. If you watch live or you watch the videos, you might have actually seen one. But we are coming out with our subdued editions that, well, by the time this is out, I think the pre-order will have been done. But that being the case, thank you for your support. Thank you for you guys helping out. Back to this chat with you and I, Frank.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did meet running the contractor circuit, and it's funny how it goes, because I don't know if you had the same experience that I did, but when you're in that arena, it's a very small circle, and it's a very small circle. I mean, there's more than 100, but really the limit is pretty tiny, because I mean, it's kind of like a bullseye. And then of the people doing that, almost every single one of them has at least one or two side hustles that they're working on. Some are going to...
Like, I'd probably say there's less than actively like 250 in the country. I mean, that's probably a loose number, but like out of all of them, I mean, if I say 10 names right now, you'd probably know at least 5.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like, if you say my name or call sign to somebody, they're going to be like, tall Italian dude, long hair, beard. Yes. Tall, super tall dude. Yes. Looks like a gorilla. That guy. Know him 100%. So yeah, the contracting community is small. And like you said, everybody has some kind of side hustle. And that's where it's at, because I mean, you've had so much time in the industry working with people from all different backgrounds. Like, you would be dumb to not utilize those people's knowledge to try and better yourself, better your family, and better everybody else around you. So yeah, 100%. Everybody I've ever met as a contractor, they all have some kind of side hustle. And that's obviously where my two started, which were side hustles, was coming back in between deployments. Like, Bull Creek was the first one. So Bull Creek Strategic, my training company. In between rotations, I'd come home and people were like, "Hey, could you teach me how to shoot?" Yeah, 100%. Like, let's do this. And obviously, throughout the years, being a non-commissioned officer in the Army, always in that leadership role, that teaching role, coming out to getting out and going into contracting, doing the same style thing, and then just taking what I've learned, because I mean, overseas, you're with Army, Navy, Marines, it's like police officers, SWAT team guys. You got such a melting pot of knowledge that I would just take it all in and just ask millions of questions. Like, well, why do you shoot like this? Or why is your grip like this? Why do you do this like this? And I would pick and choose what I liked. So then when I would come home and people would ask me to teach them to shoot, they were like, "Hey, you're very good at projecting this information. I've taken classes with 10 other people," and like, they were nowhere near the amount of input that you gave me. They just were, "Here's how to shoot." And anybody can teach you how to do something. And I know you've heard me say this a million times. Anybody can teach you how to do something, but I want to teach you why. what's the background? Like, why do you do it this way, and why are you doing this? And that's kind of where Bull Creek started, was around a campfire drinking with some buddies. And we were like, yo, why don't we do this? Like, we're all deploying constantly. Like, let's have a rotation. While I'm gone, you're here. Let's start running classes and actually bettering people, helping people better themselves. And that's really what it is it's not us teaching you how to use your firearm or be more proficient. It's teaching you how to be a better person, how to be a better human being, how to take your skill set and understand that shooting is just a small portion. It's 10% of the problem. The other 90% is mental and physical. And that's where what we teach, that's where we educate, is in the mental, physical side of things.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you could make a solid argument that learning how to shoot is sort of the gateway drug to being a responsible citizen. Like,
100%.
Perhaps that's why people hate it so much, where it's like, oh, if you learn how to shoot, you kind of know, you start learning how to pay attention to like your surroundings. And I'm not saying like some weird Jason Bourne garbage. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm responsible for this house. And then now my neighborhood, it's like, I might not be like, you know, Johnny Doofudly and walking around and patrolling the neighborhood, but it's like, you start kind of paying attention to like, oh, hey, you know, the neighbor's trash cans are knocked over. I wonder, you know, I'll pick them up, or are they okay? Or just like, who's around? And not like nosy, but I think that's just where you,
cuties.
Yeah, you start paying attention to what the hell's going on around you. Not because,
is people, the whole, like, not to get political, because neither of us like to talk that way, but like the whole everyone's right to carry thing, I agree 100%. Everybody has the right, but it's also your responsibility.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to get political. I mean, I people who have known me know that I do enjoy a really good political conversation, so I don't want to like throw that out too far. But we had a guest on the show earlier where we got into sort of the in-depth element of the relationship between rights and responsibilities and how that came out of the Enlightenment. And you don't get one without the other is really kind of how it goes. Like, you can't have another example of it that applies, I think, in leadership, especially in the military, is that you know that a military leadership or structure is broken or in disarray when somebody has the responsibility to do something, but they don't have the authority to do something. So you give a private the responsibility to do something but he's not allowed to. You basically place a weight on someone that they have to accomplish something, but then you take away their tools to do it. Like, that's a very classic failure of leadership or failure of a structure. You can see it I think you can see it in other different ways too, but yeah. So you started training while contracting, which is a busy schedule as is.
Yeah. So basically, I think I was on like 90/30s. So
okay,
I went on for 90 days, come home for 30 days, and the real reason was like I said, like after I got out of the Army, man, like I didn't want to get out of the Army. I loved it. I loved the structure to it. Like, I loved everything about it. And like, you can ask all my friends like that I grew up with, like, oh, you're a lifer, bro. Like, dudes that I grew up with that went in the military with me, like that's you all day. And then circumstances came up. I got dealt a shit deal with DA Select, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm signing a deck statement. So got out, and then, like I said, went to college, but I was lost, man. I mean, I got a degree before I even went in the Army, and then still went in as enlisted. And I've always been lost. Like, even now, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I got out and was just like, man, like none of this life is interesting to me. Like, when I was in the military, like, there was structure, there was ease of life, because all you had to do was what you were told to do. And then if you were a non-commissioned officer, all you still had to do was what you were told to do, and then just redirect it. So coming out, going to college, I'm like, all right, this isn't bad. Psychology, like, let's learn about the way the brain works. That might interest me. And it did. I mean, for the sheer fact of what we do for work is it came 100% to watch verbal cues, physical cues, and stuff like that, and why people do the things they do. It's interesting to see the way the brain works. But I just was lost. So that's when I started contracting. No, dude, I didn't have any help. Nobody helped me get into it. Nobody showed me the directions. No one showed me the way. There was no clear-cut fucking path for me to get there. I just made phone calls and talked to people, and then got on with TC. And as soon as I got on or made it through the selection process and got on contract, was like, I'm with my people. I'm with a bunch of other Neanderthals that are super smart. Where probably majority of the dudes I work with overseas, all of them had multiple degrees. There was not a dumb person. Like, our medics were PJs, and some of them doctors. Like, actually had their doctorates or were PJs, actors in the reserves in the Air Force. And then you had knuckle draggers and shit that were window lickers that still had degrees, tons of degrees. Like, why are you here doing this? And people would ask us all, like State Department and like all the representatives that we'd work with, like, why are you guys here? Like, you guys literally are very intelligent people, but you're covered in tattoos. You work out 4 hours a day, and you shoot guns the rest of the day. Like, why do you do this to yourselves? Like, because we needed a sense of purpose.
Yeah, the tribe is really clean. Like, it's clear. Like, although the tribe can be brutal at times, it can be. Like, if you find yourself on the outs, you're on the outs pretty fucking hard. Pardon my language.
It is very, very cutthroat. But if once you're in, you're in.
I think cutthroat could use a little bit of description too, because I got my way in. I guess, let's see, I found my way in for a couple of ways. One of them was I'm coming from Ranger Battalion, so there's a little bit of a shoe in there.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit, not completely. And mind you, I think it's worth saying that none of it is a handout. Like, it's never a handout.
You earn your place every single day.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the grass is the same color.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's like, oh, I want to get out of the military, go contracting. It's like, no, the grass is the same color. It's just higher.
Yeah.
There's more restrictions. That's it.
Well,
I can have a cool beard and cool clothes.
Yeah, there's another thing. There's another thing too. Like that community is that I don't necessarily think like cutthroat is a tricky word that I would use, because sometimes cutthroat means you're expecting people to kind of go behind your back and stab you so that they can get your position, or
yeah.
And given that is present, but I didn't see it any more present than anywhere else in the world. What I did see that it was much more overt. Like, if you were going to make it. If you're going to make a move on me, I probably know about it. And I'm not, and I don't look at you as a lesser human being immediately.
Yeah. Like, when I say cutthroat, I mean, like, it's teeth grinding. Like, it's not an easy feat. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can do this. Like, well, you know what? It's not hard, but it's not easy. I mean, nowadays it is. Like, they've softened the community up pretty good. But I mean, that's like kind of saying, oh, well, I went through Ranger school when it was hard. The same exact thing. I went through contracting selection when it was hard. Well, there were points like that. There was a point where Ranger school was super hard. And I mean, it still is. But then, just like contracting, there was a point where the selection process was super hard because they only wanted certain people. So that's when, like, you had to pass. You had to be. I mean, for me, like, when I went in, it was, you had to bench press 135% of your body weight. I'm a big dude. I'm 285. Like, and
that's a heavy bench press, dude.
Yeah, like 6'5". So I mean, I cut down to 245, and I mean, my bench press was, I mean, it was 315, which is easy. I can rep 315. It's fine, but it's cold. Mm-hmm. So you have to walk in cold and just bench 315.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, fine. Your run time was a mile and a half in like 10:20. You had to be 16% body fat or lower. You had to do the Illinois agility run in less than 16 seconds, which that's a knee blower right there. All those cuts back and forth. And then the bend and reach was like 27 inches or something like that. So, like, it wasn't that it was like the PT test was excruciating. It was just, it was tough. But it was meant to be that way so that you didn't have anybody floating through. So, like, if you showed up to class with 50, 60 people, after the PT test, you probably only had 30.
Yeah.
Half the people passed. And then the first week was weapons qual. So for a week straight, every single day from 8 in the morning until 7 at night was weapons. Whether it was the Glock, qualifying with an ACOG, a CCO, and an EOTech, the AK-47, shotgun, 203, long guns, whatever it was. Everything was in that week. And then that qual was, you had a qual on the Glock, the AK, 2 different platforms, the M4 with sighting, and that was it. But you had to do the State Department qual or the Flet C qual with the Izzy. That knocked out 15 people.
Yep.
And then you started, now you're down to 15, 20 people running through this 60 or 50-day selection process. So, like, that's where I mean cutthroat is. It wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. It was because it was you were a free thinker. You couldn't go in there with a military background and be like, just tell me what to do. No, just fucking go in there as a dude and just be you. And they will point you in the direction of where you have to go. But if you're in there like, oh, hey, we should all have our kits on because they're going to tell us to put our kits on, then you're not going to make it. Like, so
no,
you're going to get pushed out because you're trying to do something that's indoctrinated. Whereas instead of being a free thinker, you're trying to think for everybody else. That's not what they like. So then you get immediately coined out, and then all the instructors would be like, we're honing for that guy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's when you miss the forest, through the trees. But you kind of like, the whole kit example is like, oh, we should put our kits on because they're gonna want us to put our kits on. What that communicates to me is that you don't have a clue of what you're doing. You're just waiting for someone. You're just waiting. You're trying to appease the instructor.
Yeah, and just sit there on your hands and just wait for them to come in. Hey guys, we're doing CQB today. I need this, and this.
Yep, and you're probably going to complain when you're told to do something, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't like the way that they're teaching, vehicle work because it's not fair for. Don't care, dude. I just.
But that's what I mean by cutthroat is, yeah, you're right. I should have put it in a better term. It's not easy, but it's not hard. It's just you have to be a free thinker and you have to be an adult. But like, so
there is a direction where I think cutthroat actually does apply, and that is if you find yourself on the outside of the culture, you're done. I'm not saying there's no road to redemption, but there is a certain element that like it's not if you cross the wrong people, although there are people within the culture who hold higher influence than other people.
Oh geez, man.
There are people who do that. There's no question about it. But like if you let's say everyone fucks up. Everyone makes a mistake at some point in time. Everybody makes an error. Everyone, and as long as that error isn't so egregious that it costs lives or should have, but somehow doesn't, like it happens. So, but like once you find yourself, there's a line that no one can see, but everybody knows it's there. And the only time you really know, the only time you can define the line is when you know you've crossed it. And once you've crossed that line, you're done. You're over. You're not going to be in it. You're on the list of do not hire. And once you reach that position, like
the lost confidence.
Yeah. And so that's what I'd say is cutthroat is that like, once you've earned a seat and in that list of, non-confidence, no one is like, I mean, you're outside of the circle now, and you trying to get back in is very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's two different circles too. So like you have your OCONUS, which is where a majority of the CONUS contractors came from, is I'd probably say 90% of the guys that are working stateside all worked overseas at one point or another. Just like you saw the guys that we were with, majority of them I was with or somewhere near. And we all knew the same people because we all knew the same call signs. We all knew everyone's call sign.
Yeah.
And that circle transferred over to stateside, and that's an even more cutthroat, whatever you want to say.
We can stick to cutthroat.
Like I would say stateside is cutthroat because there's less room for error, and because there's more people. There's more people that want to do it. So there's more options out there for companies to hire. So you have to prove yourself to people that have no idea anything about your skill set. A bunch of nerds in an office, you have to make them think that you are king shit over their buddy that they have who was a cop for 4 years or was in the Army for 3 years as a S2 shop or something. Like, so that side of the CONUS side of the house, I would say, is probably more cutthroat than overseas because you've got more civilians involved, or citizens and more civilians involved with the hiring process.
And you're not sitting on a cache of DoD money or DOS money.
Yeah.
Like,
you're on a private fund.
I mean, there are exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, the work of stateside is very much so competitive because travel, it's easier to travel. You can, it's easier to travel. I don't have to fly overseas. I don't have to be gone for 90 days. In some scenarios, you can work your shift and go home at night. Like, it's very rare, but Minneapolis was a thing, and so I get the cutthroat nature of it. But it's an interesting. It's one of those things where you know what I'm talking about when I say there's like the caricature of it that most people think of, and they think of like generic Hollywood movie bad guy.
Yeah,
and you're like, and anyone like. And it's funny because it's like, oh, cool. But a company is going downhill when they start moving in that direction, starting to make you wear like tan pants and black polos. You're like, oh, we're moving towards generic Hollywood bad guy direction. You know what that tells me? You're not managing the money well. I'm going to go move to another company.
Yep.
So,
well, yeah, I agree. But like you said, the culture of it is what draws me to it and still keeps me into it. But if you were to ask me now, I get phone calls all the time, like all the instructors that that I talk to, like that's a small clique of instructors. Like there not a lot of us get along. Like we have a certain little clique of people that we hang out with because we're very true and we're very real. And then you've got your big famous bougie instructors. We are separated from them. But I get phone calls all the time from students from all these instructors all over the country. They're like, hey man, call Bull Creek, call Frank, talk to him about this because contracting people want it. And they're like you said, there's not a lot of people that talk about it or are open to it or are willing to help somebody. Yeah. But they immediately get sidetracked when someone calls me and is like, yeah, like someone told me to call you because you were a contractor. You've been a contractor. Like, I'm really interested in getting into it. When did you get out? A couple months ago, or I'm getting out in a couple months. Cool. You got a GI Bill, right? Like, yeah, go get a fucking degree.
Yep.
You're young. Start your life now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 27 years old. Exactly. Start your life now. Do not take this road. Do not get off at this exit. Keep fucking driving. Take the exit that takes you to college, or take the exit that takes you to your own business or something. Like, the contracting road is not what you want. Like, it seems glorious. It seems like it's an awesome thing, but it's not, because none of us are happy. We're all miserable pricks. The only time we're happy is when we're all together because we're with family. We're with brothers. And we can act normal without everybody thinking that we're weird or different or that we shouldn't belong in society. Because if I say something retarded, you're going to laugh at it. You're like, damn, that's true as shit, man. Whereas if I say something like that at home, my family's like, I can't believe this dude just said that out in public. Yeah. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Wow, so, your words actually spoiled the Thanksgiving dinner. Thanks, Frank. Jeez. The turkey comes back to life and is like, I'm out.
Like some Family Guy shit.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, like I said, I get phone calls all the time. Like, hey, man, I want to be a contractor. Like, no, you don't. Like, listen, I'm true and I'm real. I'm going to be honest with you. You don't. The grass is the same color. I was like, the ROE and everything you think is awesome isn't, because your lives are way more hectic and way more, you're handcuffed. Way more than when you're in the military. So now, the only difference is I get cool shoes, cool pants, I can wear whatever the hell I want to wear, jeans and a t-shirt, and a baseball hat, and have long hair and beard. And I get to look cool. That's it. It's the only difference. Nothing else is glorified or easy of it. So, like, that's what I try and tell these people, like these people is, hey, go get a degree, start your life now. Because if you go down this rabbit hole of contracting, that is a black hole that's going to keep you sucked in forever. Well, that's kind of what I want. No, it's not. Because your wife is going to hate you. You're going to end up getting divorced. You're not going to have anything going for you. Like, I'm lucky. My wife is a goddamn saint. I do
Yeah.
not know. We've been together. This is our 12 years, 13 years. This November 11th. I should know this. 12-year anniversary is in next week.
Yeah.
Oh, she's gonna watch this. Oh, I love
Yeah,
you.
we just celebrated our 7 years together,
And
and
that's awesome. That's rare, man. That is rare for dudes in our industry. And
very
like
rare, extremely
people
like
don't get that. It's like, well, are you married with kids? I am. If you want to stay that way, go get a degree and try and become assimilated into normal society and be a normal contributing person. But I was like, this whole contracting stigma that people have isn't real. They think that it's something that's amazing, something that's cool, or they're trying to, especially guys who like now who are getting out because they didn't get to experience what we experienced in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'm glad they didn't, but there's a part of them, they're trying to find something, they're missing something that they didn't get to fulfill. I'm still chasing that dragon too because there's things that I didn't get to fulfill.
yeah. I think sometimes there's like a double-edged sword there, and on
Yes.
the one hand, you have the um. I think you kind of get to the chasing the dragon phase where
Yeah.
you're getting out of the military, you're realizing that you left things unaccomplished, or there's other phrases to it too, because here's where I kind of want to go with this is I want to give the devil his due when it comes to the contracting world, because there are things about it that are like very attractive.
Yeah.
And one of them, and I'll be very clear, in that sense that you brought it up, is one of them is the people, where it's like you can really say, yeah, I mean, I don't like him, but I get along with him and we can work together. And I don't, and another example of it is that like in that world, you do have a metric by which you're able to evaluate people. You have you're right. And so like when
your
you
background doesn't matter.
your background does, your
shit thing in that scale.
it doesn't weigh it, it flavors it. So like you're coming from Ranger Battalion. If you're coming from this world, you're coming from Ranger Battalion, or you're coming from the SEALs, or whatever you're coming from, and you're entering the contracting world, and somebody's like, oh, did you know such and such, and they're like, yeah, and then that guy's like, yeah, he was a complete turd in battalion, and now you've got a thing on you, and you got to figure something out, and like that, your background, CAG or Delta or whatever, doesn't define you. It doesn't give you a rank of authority. It gives people context by which to judge you.
Yeah, and I learned that very young.
Yep.
So like my first rotation, I got put on a mobile team for 2 months. The last month of it, I was the lowest guy on the totem pole. They started up a new QRF team. Like, hey man, you got to go over to this team. Lowest man on the totem pole. Sorry.
That's how it goes.
Cool, got it. Came back, went home, came back off a rotation, and my old shift lead was like, yo, dude, I told you I wasn't going to leave you out to dry. He's like, you're on 3-1 now. You're the new TC for 3-1. I'm like,
there you go.
Man. I was like, yo, I spent years in Afghanistan. Like, this is my 4th month in Iraq ever.
Yeah.
And you want me to be the tactical commander for a mobile team?
Yeah.
Yes. Trial by fire. Go out there and do it. So on our teams, like you said, you've got dudes who were SF, SEALs, regular Marines, especially tons of Marines.
You had Marines. Okay. I had a lot of Army dudes.
Dude, tons of Marines. And they were all from 3-1 and 3-2. All of them. So I probably know more Marines than half the Marines now. And
probably.
Which is funny because someone will be like, oh, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, oh, 3-1. They're like, weren't you in the Army? I was like, yeah, but I was a contractor. I worked with them. So
I just downloaded all of the DoD into my brain.
So like all these different skill sets. One of the dudes on I had, I think, three ex Green Berets on my team, which, like I said, that shit doesn't mean a thing because one of them sat me down once. It was like, right when I got that position, I was like, Jay Bear, like, I'm not going to lie, man. Like, I'm stressing out. Like, I've been a window licker for 2 months in the back seat of the Follow. And then I was a QRF dude for 4 weeks. Now you guys have me as a mobile, like, tactical commander of a team on the road. I'm like, I'm going to fuck this up. like people's lives are in my hands when we're on that road. And he's like, let's put it this way, dude. You're in it for a reason. He's like, Styx wouldn't have put you there if he didn't think you could do it. Trial by fire. If he put you there, there's a reason for it. I was like, he's not even on the team. He's on a different team. And he's like, trust me, he put you there for a reason. He's like, you'll figure it out and you'll make it work. And he kind of helped me wing it. And then we got a bunch of dudes who had higher experience than me. And I'm sitting there giving hood briefs to these dudes that have way more experience than I do in the form of operating. And again, Jay Bear pulled me aside and he's like, what's the deal? And I'm like, I feel like you guys should be in charge, not me. And he's like, why? I was like, because your guy's background. He's like, no one gives a shit that I used to have a beret that was green or that I used to be MARSOC or whatever. No one fucking cares that you were a Raider because we all went through the same selection process. We all got through the same vetting process. We're all here because we all met the same standard.
Yeah,
Not
very much so.
Person's better than the other. So what you need to do, Frank, is step the fuck up and act like you know more and are better than everybody who you're in charge of right now, so that they have faith that you can do what you have to do.
Yes, exactly. You need it. You need it.
Okay.
It doesn't. It's your responsibility to step up and act like a leader in this position.
And once he put it in that perspective, at a young age of me contracting, like when I started 8 years ago, was it doesn't matter. I don't give a shit. And like that's when I started to get not arrogant, but like we'd get dudes on the team who, I was a SEAL. The first thing they do is tell you like that, or like whatever, they were SF or they were CAG or whatever it may be. As soon as someone comes on a team and says that, immediately the entire team's like,
oh,
don't care. You're one of those dudes.
Yeah.
Like, don't give a shit. Like, nobody cares what your background is. Or you get the stupid comments like, oh, you were a SEAL? Like, so you're really good at like putting balls on your face, right? Like,
you know.
I got tons of fucking SEAL buddies. I love you guys.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Do you know Rob O'Neill? Are you actually Rob O'Neill?
But I mean that was the
no. I'm not Rob O'Neill. I'm James O'Keefe from Project Veritas. So you're like,
like, that was the shit that would happen, and like we would all chuckle about it. And if they would get pissed off, you would just automatically know they weren't going to make it on the team. They weren't going to, like, physically, mentally, and capability wise, probably could do good, but to fit in with a culture, weren't going to make it because they got pissed off at something like that.
Yeah, there's something very organic to it too, because one of the challenges I think we run into is when you leave that world and you get out into this, you're spending more time in what we call, the real world, which is what you want to call it. The problem that you run into is that there are different levels of evaluation for so many different people that you interact with.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that I think is exactly what happens with all the different cultural movements and all this different thing. We're like, oh, you need to respect my truth and all this kind of garbage. Is that like, one of the things about the world out there, outside, that in America right now, that is not the same in the contracting community, is that exact example. That dude who steps into the room, as he's finished the selection process, his first rotation, he steps into the room and he's like, I was a SEAL and blah blah blah, and everybody knows, they're like, oh, he's one of those guys, and you don't need to say anything. Yep. Like, everybody knows immediately that he's just trying to run on his reputation. And what's also really interesting is it almost always goes unstated. Like, nobody goes, check announced position, next thing, check defied authority. It's like,
let me now find the biggest man in the room and fucking hit him so I can establish dominance.
Exactly. But and there's a certain path you can take. Like, if you walk into the room and you immediately state your resume, your people are going to roll their eyes. And most, and it's not that a number of people don't do that. It's that becomes kind of like one of those, like, what do you call them? Those diagrams where, you start, is your name Bob? Yes or no? Yes, you go here. Yes. No, you go here, right? A flow chart or whatever. We'll call it a flow chart.
The thing you do in like third grade with the paper?
Oh, okay. One of those too. Yeah. So like it becomes basic. Yep. I don't know what those things. Cat's cradle. That's the sting, the strings thing. Whatever. I was homeschooled, so I have a pass. But
one of those.
But one of those guys. Yeah. Yes. Trust me, I am smarter than you. Because my mom teacher told me to. So, but point being said is, so you got that guy, and he walks in the room and he says his resume, and you're like, oh no. And then the next thing he does will oftentimes determine where he ends up, because he's either going to go, okay, and he'll do that because that's his habit, and you're like, okay, he'll become one of the boys, and you'll figure out that he's like worth his time. He's worth his salt. He pulls his weight. He volunteers. He rotters up. He does his work. And all of this is unstated. Or he immediately goes from, well, I mean, when I was in the teams and blah, 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 blah. And at every moment, he is a friction point, because you have all this dumb garbage that you have to put up with. And none of it, and some of it legitimately is just like, oh, this is bureaucratic bloat. Got it. There's no reason for it. There's no explanation to it. There's no value add to it, but you have to do it because of bureaucratic bloat. And then there will always be that guy who's like, back in the teams. And then that guy starts working his way out of grace. Yeah. And what started with, well, I walked into this room and I was a ranger sniper. And you're like, cool. We're going to the range. Can you like teach me how to do this? And they're going to, and if they're not cool with it, you're like, bye. Yeah. And that's just kind of how it works. And they set themselves on a path, and a lot of it goes unstated, but you kind of know who's the guy who you're like, I'm with Will or Wilson or whatever his name is.
We saw it on that, the last job that we were on was when we all sat in that room, and old man got up and was like, you young bucks need to shut up. And
he was off the contract in like a week.
Yeah. Quit fucking talking the way you're talking, because your shit does not matter. Nobody cares where you came from. Nobody here is an actual operator. And there was skill sets from all degrees there in that room out of the 20 of us. And his main thing, which is what I love and I praise him for it, is nobody gives a shit what you used to do. Yeah. That dude over there was he was a nerd in S3 or S1 or S2 or 42 Alpha. No one cares, because you know what? He's been contracting for more than 7 years than you have. Yeah. So that means he knows what he's doing more than you do. That guy over there. All these guys that you're saying weren't operators or weren't trigger pullers that are here on contract right now have all been contracting longer than you have. Sit down, shut up, and maybe you'll learn something new.
Well, it's also interesting how different environments have played that out, right? Because like you start in the military. Let's just say you start in the military. You start in the military, and it has a bona fide rank structure, and then it's got kind of an unofficial thing. You've got your E4 mafia and whatever. Yeah. But after the military, there isn't a rank structure, and if you go from military into contracting, then it becomes time, experience, connections. Mm-hmm. So somebody and it's not like, oh, well, I've been in 1 year, 3 months, and you've been in 1 year, 2 months, I have superiority. It's not like the unions and the garbage like that, but there definitely is like a little bit of, no, that's Steve. He's been here for like 4 years. He has seniority on you. I don't care who you are. Right. Yeah.
But and realistically, like, everybody's on the same pedestal.
They are. They are, generally speaking, but there is a seniority approach. And usually
there is. Everyone knows who that one person is, but in all realist, everyone's on the same pedestal at the same exact height. But there are a few people on that pedestal where everyone's going to kind of look to, like, hey, you've been doing this for a hot minute longer than I have. Like, I want to hear what you have to say. Yes, yeah. Opinions matter, but your opinion weighs a little bit heavier than mine because, let's face it, you've been doing it longer than I have.
Yeah, but the seniority I'm making the argument too is that, like, you brought the case up with the fella who was in the room, and it was like, in all intents and purposes, I'm sure he's a good dude. I've never actually had to work with him, or I've never worked with him, so I've never had any issues. But the challenge with the issue there was that you had other people who had sort of been a part of that circuit for a while longer, and it was like, if you had not started with your position, I think people would have responded to you a lot better. It's not, or who you had been, or whatever, right? So, like, and it's not the end of the world, because if you want to call what he did an infraction, which is probably a bit of a stretch as is, it's like, I don't think a day in the world would have changed if they got a call and they said they needed more guys and they brought him back on the team, and he probably would have ironed everything out and it would have been great. Like my spider sense or whatever it is like, that was not a well-played move, but you're probably a solid dude. That's all it is. You know what I mean? And so what I'm moving on from there though is that there is a bit of a seniority to this team in this environment, and that people who've been around a while usually have a little bit more sway. And it's not my rank, therefore it's like, hey man, you probably shouldn't be starting a fight with Steve right now because he's been around for a while. Like everybody knows who he is, and he's kind of the guy that we're looking to.
I had that on a job a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I started laughing my ass off because as soon as it happened, one of the younger dudes was like, hey man, why don't we listen to what Bull has to say? I was like, what? I was like, nah, dude. Like, we're all on the same level here. And he's like, yeah, but you've been around for a minute. And I'm like, damn. I was like,
yeah. Here's
here's
Bully telling people not to be in, and he's like, I'm the old head now. I've been around for a while.
Like literally, I just stopped and was like, did you just coin me as the old guy? Like,
yeah, dude, I'm 32. I'm 32 and I'm graying. I've got like gray streaks in my hair. So eventually, whatever. But the interesting thing that I've noticed too about it is that seniority resets. Mm-hmm. So like, it kind of resets in theater. Now you can take some of your old reputation and translate it into the new one, but it refreshes in theater. So like I remember, whether it's like, let's just use 3 examples that are like in the quote unquote contracting world or the contracting bubble are relevant. Like you had Afghanistan or Iraq. And I think that both of those were kind of separate, and they were like separate but conjoined trees. Like, right. But like,
they were 2 different places, like 2 completely different places. Because
exactly.
Travis, who were one of my instructors, my lead instructor, he was Afghanistan contracting, whereas I was Iraq. And 2 completely different worlds. Like I came from a world where it was still ran by all the OGs, so call signs were a thing.
Yep.
He was in Afghanistan where call signs weren't a thing because it was a newer breed of contractors.
I was Afghanistan. I spent time in Afghanistan. So, but we still had call signs, and so I mean, and I think by the end of it, I don't know how that worked out. But I do know this one is that you had like Iraq and Afghanistan, and then you had stateside, and then you had Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And those things and when Ukraine kicked off, that was sort of a reset for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
It was really odd because like people who had been in for a while were now, it's almost like a lot of people were cut back down to rung one. And I'm not saying in a negative sense. It was that like, okay, this is a new pool. This is a new experience level. So now language proficiency matters, different equipment proficiency matters, recon and route planning and map reading and all these different like factors skill sets came into relevancy. I wouldn't say relevancy again, but they came very extremely quickly into relevancy. And so while I'm sure there were some people who, let's just say lost status because of the reset, became something else, what I saw generally speaking is that everyone kind of went back to like, okay, we're all back to being equals now. Some people we're going to look to because we know that they know how to they're pretty proficient in organizing a team or whatever. But what value add do I have? What value add do I have? What value add do I have? And it's like
it went back to almost the militaristic structure base of your RTO, your ATL, your TL, your gunner. Like it kind of went back to that. Well, this dude's really good with language. This guy's really good at running a team. This guy's really good at structuring. This guy's really good at acquiring things. All right, we have our full team of guys that can do things. He's a medical guy, whatever. It went back to that structure again where you couldn't just nitpick like, well, overall, this is a good person. No, like we need somebody who specializes in this.
Yeah, you needed to be able to like people kind of had to dust off that this is my assets category, which in a cinematic sense, I think that's one of the parts that can be really attractive. Like, I will make the point that this idea of like getting the boys back together or getting the team together and like picking people does have a certain allure to people who are even outside of the culture. And when I
was stoked as shit, man.
Yeah,
like, and I'm not gonna lie, like when all that stuff went down. And I started getting phone calls from like the homies, like, yo, Bands get back together. I was like, oh shit, a fucking reunion, like a reunion album. Let's go.
Yeah. Let's go, dude. Like I got a phone call and I was like, boop. So, yeah. Why do you gotta ask? Like, hey, we're putting a team together.
All you had to do is just send me a text message with like an ETA and like a time and destination. Like,
dude, you ruined it for me. I didn't want you to give me a phone call on a flight. I wanted you to give me a text message and a 10-digit grid and it's time of arrival. And I'm like,
I would have been there. And that goes back to that whole culture that you speak of is it's family. Like the reason why we keep doing it is it's family. Like I'm closer with the dudes that I contracted with than the guys I was in the Army with. And don't get me wrong, like I love the dudes I was in the Army with and that I spent 16, 17-month deployments on straight. Like, whereas you had your 3-month deployments, we've had 16-month deployments.
Yeah, I know I'm privileged, and excuse me, in Ranger Battalion, it wasn't 3-month deployments, it was 115 days, okay? You got to add the
travel time back, so 90 days.
Oh, no. If you want travel time, it's 117 days, okay? Because we were bougie, we weren't like you, we didn't have to get in some sort of sardine can. We had whatever. We're like, we're going to go home right now.
And that's the thing is like I said, I love the dudes I was in the Army with. I still talk to them on a regular basis, like a majority of them. But the dudes that I contracted with, it's a fucking brotherly love. Like, I know that out of all the dudes I contracted with, if I was to call any of them, and I need you right now, like fucking yesterday, that dude will be at my house in as long as it takes him to get from point A to point B. He will drop whatever he's doing. He will call in sick to work, and he will be there, no matter what. It doesn't matter how sincere or how non-important it is. It's important to him that I needed him or whoever, and that they showed up.
Yeah, it's a weird thing too because I recently moved across the country, and I made a long distance move, and I actually had a friend who I had contracted with who was like, "Hey, do you need help moving?" And I'm like, bro, it's a 3-day drive. And I'm like, and he's just like, yeah, do you need a hand? Like, no, but thanks. Like, I got it figured out. Like, we had planned this out like 2 months ago, but again, it's like a friend, a contracting dude who's like, it's a weird question to ask when you think about it. 'Cause you're like, if you're moving across the city or across the state, it's like, yeah, 3. I need someone to help load.
Better than 2 trucks, yeah.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like friends did help us move from our old house because they helped pack up the house, and that was great. Like it was, but it was weird to get a phone call from a guy being like, "Do you need help with the whole move?" Like it's going to be a week of your time, dude, because you're going to have to fly out here, get in a truck, drive for 3 days, and then drop, and then unload for a day. And I'm like, and I don't know what that's going to look like for lodging. And he's like, "Oh man, I'll sleep in the truck." I'm like, "We're good, thanks." So,
but like I said, that's the aspect that I like about it is that they will drop whatever they're doing to help you, no matter what it does to their relationship at home or their job or whatever it is. Because like, there's times where like I've dropped it in a hat, and I was like, "Megan, I gotta go right now." I was like, "So and so just called me. I gotta go," and she doesn't even question it. Like if she knows that it was somebody I contracted with, she's like, "Okay, I'll figure it out," and just go.
Yeah,
and she doesn't have any issues with it because she knows that if I'm dropping what I'm doing, it's for a reason, and it's probably important for that person.
Yeah, no, that is one of the places where I did find some sense of camaraderie, and I've been very encouraged by it. So we've been drilling down pretty heavy on this whole contracting world, but Bull Creek Strategic and you do a little bit more than contracting, and I know it's going to be an interesting subject. But one of the main objectives of this show is to really be addressing gun culture writ large. And I know contracting has its influence in there, just like military has its influence in gun culture. And I think you can say with a relative amount of safety that, in fact, some of like the militaria is what's driving a lot of modern contemporary American gun culture, as we're kind of moving away from the ranch hand style to the capable person, modern warfare style, like, what's a popular gun to buy right now? A Scar. And you're like, well, I mean, it still is, but
boots are heavy.
Ugg boots are heavy. Yeah. I have a very like complicated opinion about the Scar, and it really is because my experience on it is old now.
Yeah.
But
like
I broke them.
Minimalistic when it comes to firearms. So my background with guns, I guess would be the easiest way to start off, is my family moved from the city out to the country. So my family is a bunch of cityites. Like, moved me out to the country when I was a young boy, where I then grew up picking potatoes, pulling titties on like a dairy farm, and like that's what I did. That's the area that I grew up in.
How did you come up with this phrasing? I'm pulling titties on a dairy farm. And you're like,
pulling titties on a fucking dairy farm.
Oh, gosh.
Which translated very well into the infantry. So, okay.
Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Yeah, because everybody. There are so many ways you can go with that. None of them are okay.
There's so many ways. Dick jokes.
So in the effort of preserving mystery, moving on. You moved to the woods.
Family was a bunch of idiots, weren't into firearms, didn't like guns, to the point where like I couldn't own any when I was younger. Like, my father didn't hunt, but my grandfather was an Eagle Scout. My dad was an Eagle Scout. My uncle was an Eagle Scout. Actually, all two of my uncles. So my dad and his two brothers, Eagle Scouts. I joined Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, and that's where I got into shooting. Was in Boy Scouts. Went to summer camp, start shooting clay pigeons. I'm like, this is fun. Like, this is really cool. Then start shooting 22. Then start getting into competition and doing the youth NRA competitions for Boy Scouts. And then I was like, all right. And the Boy Scout troop that I was in was very militaristic in the fact of a lot of the leaders were ex-military. So if your belt wasn't brass on brass and your gig line wasn't right, push-ups. Like, if your neckerchief wasn't rolled right, push-ups. If you weren't standing at parade rest, like in formation, push-ups. So then when I got into the military, in the Army, it was super easy. But I got looked at as, as like a goody kid in basic training. It's like, oh, you fucking suck up. Like, well, no. It's too easy to do what the fuck you're told. Like, if you just do what you're told, we don't have to get smoked. So if you just do what you're supposed to do and shut up, this will be easy on all of us. So Boy Scouts translated that super easily because I always did push-ups there. So, like, when I got in the Army, I'm like, cool, if I just stand here and do what the fuck I'm supposed to do, I wanted to do push-ups. Easy. But normal, like, people that didn't have that upbringing weren't like that. They were a bunch of kids that were just like, I want to be cool and show off to everybody. Like, well, no, just shut up so that we can get through this as easily and as painless as possible so we can learn the most without our bodies getting destroyed. So
yeah, or like so that you can pay attention to like what is actually meaningful. Like part of basic training is games that have no win. There are no win scenarios. Like that's just how it goes.
Yep.
And we get to look back with the benefit of retrospect. But like exactly all the people who are like, oh, I'm gonna be a cool guy and I'm gonna like rebel in basic training. It's like that is the dumbest decision you could make, because not only is it going to like reduce your capacity going forward, like it's, like you're going to leave basic training. You're going to go, because if you've got a ranger contract or an airborne contract, you're going to go from basic training to airborne school, and they're going to be like, hey, this dude's a turd. And suddenly your push-ups don't count very much. And you're like, oh gosh. So my point being said is it's not that there's a system that has to be evaluated. It's that like, pick and choose where you're gonna make your stand and where you're gonna sacrifice things, because basic training is not the place to be a hero. Legitimately, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Everyone I know who made a name for themselves in basic training didn't make it a year in the military.
Well, I remember back in basic training this one time, but that's so. Like I said, Boy Scouts, shooting, and then joining the military, and getting in airborne, doing all that stuff. Then we started, like right before a deployment, we hired Spartan Tactical, which is Jim Smith out of Alaska, which does what I do now, or I do what he does, just instruct. So
Okay.
my unit contracted Spartan Tactical to come teach us how to shoot handgun, shoot rifle better, and evasive driving. And that was my first taste into actually learning how to manipulate firearms. Whereas basic training is exactly that. It's the basics. It's teaching you the fundamentals, barely. How to pass a qual, and that's it. You go to your unit to refine those skills. And deploying, obviously, there wasn't a lot of time to refine anything because we were all still learning in 2007. Like, we were still learning what the hell we were doing because we had no clue. Hence the reason why we were shooting with SWAT teams and stuff to try and figure it out. And then, like, coming out of the military, like, oh, you're infantry. You're probably really good at shooting guns. Like, I mean, I'm okay. I mean, I hold my own, but I'm not an expert. And then that's when I started to get into my cousin who shoots competition. Hey, man, can you teach me how to shoot better? Yeah, man. Well, you shoot really good. Like, well, I was given the gift of grasping concepts very easily. So
Good.
if you explain something to me, I can pretty much, if I watch you do it once, I can pretty much mimic it and do it again and then be fluent with it. Just one of the skill sets that I have. So, like, he started showing me how to shoot competition, explain the process to me, like, oh, this is fun, cool. Then going into contracting, really started diving into handgun manipulation, different tactics, different techniques. So that's where I really started to learn about firearms was contracting. Again, it goes back to that, is because there was a melting pot of people, so there were so many techniques and so many different ways to do it. And that's what sparked Bull Creek, was coming home and seeing all these, all these FUD instructors out there, like, with their red shirts and their NRA certifications and all that stuff, which, yes, I have them now because of the store and the business, because I have to, because of insurance liability reasons, and the state wants to see that you are accredited. I'm like, well, I have 17 years of credit. Like, what more do you want?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend a day on bureaucratic issues with just how things play out, and at the end of the day, gun culture is not driven by bureaucracy. And if your role in gun culture is dependent on bureaucracy, just retire, dude. You're done. Yeah. Like, your value here is expired.
And so that's where my whole gun culture started to come from, was that civilian atmosphere of contracting and competition. So, like, now, fast forward 2022, me owning a gun store with one of my best friends, I don't own a ton of guns. Like, people are like, oh, you own a gun store, you probably have a ton of guns. I'm like, no. All the guns I have are practical. If I can't take them with me, I don't want them, because they're just going to be useless. So I only own a few. Like, I don't have more than 20. Like, I've got a deer gun, I've got a bird gun, I've got a clay gun, and then obviously I have a bunch of pistols. Because like my father passed away, so I got a bunch of his pistols when he passed away.
Yeah, but handguns don't count. They're only a 0.5 value.
Yeah, and then, like, so this is like my go-to, my mod mat, my checkmate is like my go-to for everything. And then I did a PCC because I was like, when I was deploying all the time, it's like, wait, I have to take 5.56 and 9mm. I'm like, well, that's stupid. Why don't I just do a PCC and just run Glock 17 mag, because I run a Glock 17 anyways, and then I don't have to change anything. I can just take 9mm and Glock 17 mags, and I can run my pistol and my rifle. So that's how I look at it, is guns are cool. Yes, they have that stigma to them where, yes, history and neat things and full autos and all that stuff. But, like, you know just as well as I do, we were bred into that. Like, we were born into that militaristic side of firearms, where to us they're a tool.
Yeah, so, very much so.
So, when I see full autos, like, with my friends, they're all like, that's so rad. Like, you got a full auto. I'm like, it's just wasting money. Like, are they cool?
Yeah.
Yes, they hold that little bit of coolness, but to me, guns are purpose-driven. They're meant, they're designed for a reason, and I don't need that. That's how I look at the gun culture, is everything needs to be purpose-driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a sometimes it's easier to point out the, what's the word? Sometimes it's easier to point out the transgressions than it is to point out the virtues. And
Yeah.
an example of a transgression would be like trying to force a scenario to fit the equipment you have.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so like, it can, you can apply that mentality to multiple different things, but when you see it in the real world, you usually go, oh, that's what's going on here, is that you're making a justification. You're trying to create a scenario to fit the thing that you want it to do. Like, whether it's, belt feds for Mongolian hordes, which is an inside joke to an inside joke, to whether it's, like 10 millimeters, the best home defense handgun, and you're like, okay, and this question of best and what is best girl and what is best gun, and you're like, yeah, a lot of this stuff gets answered by focusing on what's the objective.
Yes.
And I don't mean this as in like, you're in an argument with your friend and who would win in a fight, Superman or Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. Well, like I'm not, then you're trying to figure out that argument. Like, hey, remember what that is. That's a fictional joke on a fictional joke. So rather like put it to the test, go to the range, figure it out, what you're trying to do. What is the objective? Like, and it's fine, cause what is best statistically only matters in Call of Duty, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
like if you want like an actual, what do you think is the best? And I'm not a fanboy, but I'm gonna say a Glock 19 or an M&P9.
Yeah, there's nothing against it. Like, I mean, there are. Let's see. Let me rephrase this. Some things are a threshold, and some things are otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and then you're dealing with like evaluating what is best, and then you have to ask the question of what are the methods of evaluation. Is it like,
out there? 100% there are.
What is better, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So
like, I get it all the time. Like people coming into the store, like, well, what gun should I get? Like, well, I mean, what are you going to use it for? Well, home defense, and I want to carry. All right, a Glock 19. Well, I can carry that. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter what size you are. It's literally a one size fits all. Well, it doesn't feel good in my hand. Like, well, no, you come take a class. We teach you how to actually shoot. Doesn't matter what gun you have. You'll be able to shoot any gun that you have as long as you understand the concept of fundamentals. The reason why I say that gun, though, is because in 1986 it was designed, and it hasn't changed since 1986. It's true and proven. There's nothing that can discredit that, whereas the P320 literally has been dropped on its face for the past 5 years and to me, is not a good gun. Like,
I prefer the SIG P320 to the Glock 19 for the grip angle when using a red dot.
The grip angle is better, but my issue with it is how many problems they had designing that gun. That's where my issue is drop fires and trigger shatters, the height over bore, how heavy the gun is. Like, can I shoot a 320 all day? Are they nice guns? 100%. But do I trust my life on it? No. There's 30 parts in that trigger housing, whereas there's 37 parts in an entire Glock.
Yep.
So, like, to me, when it comes to functionality and practicality, the Glock is superior because you can drop it off a building and that bitch is not going to fire unless something falls into that trigger well and pulls that trigger and disengages all three safeties. You can't say that about a SIG or an M&P because they're both single action guns where once they're cocked, they're cocked.
Yeah. There are certainly differences to being made. Yeah. But this also I think is an interesting point that you're making, because as we're having this conversation about a very, very germane but banal topic, handguns, we're not integrating. Sometimes you're bringing up things like there are 3 internal safeties, it's functioned this way, or it's got the legacy of this much time. We are bringing in other context, and one thing that I found encouraging and that I think is driving gun culture is that there was a time where a lot of gun culture was entirely driven by what you owned and what you justified owning. And now a lot of it is like, and now I see a lot of gun culture being involved with things like radios and how do I learn how to do something new, and how do I add something, and how do I find someone to do some of that with, and how do I figure out, like, how do I add capacity to my capability? Because how do I add capabilities to my resume? Because this goes back to the contracting thing, and I thought it was interesting that you brought it up, is that you had a shooting qualification. Military rarely has shooting qualifications. And those qualifications are nothing but chest candy. You've got a marksman or a whatever the badge is. What's the marksman badge that you hang down? You can have like sharpshooter. There's
the rifle qualification badge.
Whatever. There's like some other one. You know what I mean? Like there's I forget what they call.
The German shoots the sneer.
Yeah, right. But my point being said is that like the military very rarely has like qualifications. There are some, but they're not as much. Whereas in the contracting world, there's nobody there to tell you how to shoot the qual. Nope. And nobody cares. If you can't shoot it, you can't shoot it. So for everybody who attends that course, it's on them and their budget and their time to figure out how to shoot well enough to pass that qual. And if they pass that
qual, there goes a 6-figure paycheck.
Whatever it is, right? You're there. You maybe you're going in for a requal and you haven't, and you have been slacking and. Well, hey, dude, you're going to have to like wait 3 months or whatever till the next class starts.
Yeah, I watched dudes literally like get kicked off contracts for failing their qual.
Yeah, but going back to American gun culture and how things are moving forward is that it's interesting to see how people are starting to pursue building that what you would call a contractor resume. I'm capable. I know how to function in a ham radio scenario. I know how to run this kind of thing. I'm capable of at running ATAC. I've got all these kind of like skill sets.
I got fire starting kits.
Like a tire knots. Yep, fire starting kit. It's not even that you have a go bag. It's that like I've got my stack of guns. That's great, and then I can shoot to a certain level, and I'm fit to a certain level. But it's like I can also land nav. I can also do this. I can also do this.
Man, oh, that chaps my ass. Like that to me is the highest standard should be on fitness.
Okay, yeah.
Like in my opinion, like I see it. I mean, you can think people who are watching this, you can be like, wow, Frank's a fucking asshole. I don't care. But if you aren't in some kind of physically fit form, you're gonna die. Like if something bad happens, you can't get out of the way. You can't control yourself. You don't have the stigma or the energy to do so. Like, well, I can shoot a gun. That's only 10% of the problem. You still have to be physically capable enough to solve said problem. I mean, I don't give a shit if you're a fat slob because I know fat slobs that can still run 1.5 miles in 13 minutes or 10 minutes or 11 minutes, whatever it may be, or a 2 miler in 13 minutes. If you can do that and be a fat slob, that's perfectly fine. But all these people who were like, listen, I got a gun. I don't need to be in shape. Like, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not the mindset to have.
So here's the thing, right? Like, here's the thing with that. This is where I get to be a bit of an optimist. And I think there was a time where that kind of personality still could sort of coexist in certain elements of gun culture. And now I think it's losing ground. I think, and what I'm trying to say is, people are evaluating your physical fitness when it comes to like anything other than generic USPSA shooting a lot more, and it's really is a part of it. I'm not saying that everyone.
Last year, it started to pick up where people are actually trying to become more fit. Like the fit culture is starting to be a thing.
Yeah, well, I've been seeing people in gun culture criticize people for being able to shoot but not having the physical fitness to be worth a damn in any in the quote unquote scenarios that they're preparing for since 2015. Yeah, I've been seeing that, and so I don't think it's anything new. I think what's happening is that my crowd is getting really small. Yeah. Because they're either getting small and they're losing weight, or they're getting small and they're kind of like self-selecting themselves out of the arena. And I mean, that's fine too. The other issue that runs into the fitness thing, and I think this is an extension of that evaluation, is gumption. Like, do you have the gumption to do something hard? And sometimes people will say no.
Yeah. Dude, I'll be the first to admit it, man. Like, if you talk to anybody who went through any kind of selection process and they tell you that it wasn't hard, they're lying to you. Like, there was so many times, like, I mean, you going through RIP. You went through RIP, right?
Yeah, but I will make arguments against that. The difficulty of a selection process, I'll make some arguments about, again, and maybe mine is a unique scenario, but when I went through RIP, I didn't go through a standard RIP class. So in some ways, I actually had resentment because I felt like that rite of passage was robbed from me. But I went through a class where the majority of people passed. We had like a 15% attrition rate or something like that, like maybe even smaller. We started with like 315 and graduated with 280. So we had less than 10%. We had almost about a 10% attrition rate as opposed to like a 75 to 80%.
Yeah.
So
I went through, like, man, it was like 2000, early 2007.
Okay.
Hey, 11 Bravos, raise your hand. Vincenza, brag. What?
Yeah. Because they didn't want you guys. Yeah, you and I had very.
They were looking for all the other skills because they were so heavy.
Yeah.
Everything, but no, I get what you're saying. But like what I'm saying, like, is everything's hard. I mean, for the most part, there is something you did in your life that was hard, and I'll be the first to admit there was times where I thought I was going to quit, like where my body was broken, where literally in my mind I'm like, this is it, I'm quitting, I can't do this anymore. Like I faced that more in my like first into second year of Ranger Battalion, which was like that was where because that's what I didn't get in RIP. It was like okay. But in that window around between my first and because I got over mid rotator, so I didn't really get to like my first deployment was really small. It was small, but in that space where like you're kind of the battalion is trying to figure out who's who, and because they just got this flood of new guys and team leaders are trying to figure out whether they got the guy who was let in, the mid quality or the high quality guy. There's all these dynamics going on and. That's where I had it, where it was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I just don't know if I want to do this. And it was, for me, it was less physical. It was much more, mental. And then, but you had to face that. Or like I recycled mountain phase in Ranger School. And there was definitely like that. It was actually the last day. It was the day before. So for those who have not been to Ranger School, there's 3 phases at time of recording. There's the bending phase, the mountain phase, and the swamp phase. And if I remember right, each phase is 3 weeks long. And so, they're roughly 3 weeks long. And so the first week of bending phase is all your PT. It's push-up test, running test. You have all these physical tests. You got to be able to run the obstacle course. You got to be able to jump out of a plane. You got to be able to run the 5 mile. You got to be able to do a 12-mile ruck march. And once that first week is done, it was their kind of, I think their interpretation of Hell Week, because it was kind of whatever, but it wasn't that bad. It was definitely stressful because you're like, every day was a chance to get selected out because you didn't pass some sort of requirement. And then after that, you went into the field, which you do 1-day operations. You'd start there, you go out, you come back, you go out and you come back and you go out. And so you do, instead of having patrol based activities and in retrospect, it actually sounds kind of fun, but then now as an adult, and I'm like, man, I should have had way more fun when I went to these schools. It's hard to go through. Then you look back at it, and you did make it through.
Yeah, and it was
for granted. You actually take it for what it was, and you like, hey, I actually did learn something. That was hard, but you know what? I did it, and that's awesome.
So there was, mountain. So then when I went to mountain phase. The mountain phase starts with, you've got like a week of skills where you learn little bits on mountaineering, some knot tying qualifications and all this other kind of stuff. And then you've got 5 days out in the field, 2 days back, 5 days out in the field, 2 days back. And those 5 days out in the field are generally pretty difficult because this is where that little sleep, little food, lots of movement starts really applying because you're going down and then you're going up a hill and you're going down a mountain and up a mountain. And it does wear you out. But it was that last day of mountain phase where they're basically rolling everybody who hasn't gotten their go through a leadership position to see who can make it. And basically nobody does because it's a gambit of no one gives a shit anymore. Because everyone who's gotten their go, they're like, whatever, dude. And everyone who hasn't gotten their go is scrambling, trying to figure out how to do it. And so like that day was really disheartening because by the time that day ended, I knew that I didn't get my go because my first time whatever. And that day was like the next day rolls, and everyone who passed goes on to Florida, and you're watching everybody you've just been through this with leave.
Yeah.
And like, man, I got a week of recovery, and then I got to go do all of that again. That one night was like, this kind of sucks. Do I really want to keep up? And then I went to bed and slept for 3 days. That was it. That was the whole story. I was like, okay, cool. I'm staying in Ranger School. I got to eat a big meal, and then I just hibernated for like 3 days. Woke up, ate a bunch, went to sleep, woke up, ate a bunch, went to sleep, woke up, ate a bunch, went to sleep, started working out, had 3 days of recovery, got back into the next class, passed.
Yeah.
Then you have to face it. Like, you have to face the demon of, do I want to quit? And it's like, man, do I want to quit?
Dude, that demon is something fierce, man. That's the best way to put it. Is I think that's why that brings us full circle into like why we are who we are, is because that demon is constantly chasing us, or that dragon's tail, or whatever you want to call it, is because we're always looking for that harder feat just to prove something to ourselves. And that's the thing, is everyone's like, well, you don't owe anybody anything. And like, that's true. We don't. Like, I don't owe anybody shit, but I'm constantly holding myself to a higher standard to prove to myself, like, to fight that demon that I have that's deep down inside of me, to prove to him that I still got this, and I can still do this, or I can do that.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting part too, because you and I can bring it up from the context of being military and contracting people. And one thing that gets brought up quite a bit on the show is sort of the division between citizens, civilians, and like military veterans kind of people. And to be clear, I think that division is actually closing. Like, yes. And by now, I'm sure people have been listening to this show since like the beginning. You're probably getting tired of me talking about it. So like, I apologize, but that's an interesting subject that I haven't figured out how to. So yeah, like, thanks for your problem, but so that's one of the things that I haven't quite figured out very well, is that we have this interesting issue of like a perfect storm problem, because you've got a community of people. It's just a gun culture as a whole. You've got a community of people that we're all kind of trying to figure stuff out. And one of those elements of gun culture is like striving for more and to do better and to be be harder. And there's a competitive nature to it, and a business nature to it, and a philosophical element to it of like, how do we build our community? And one of the things that I found interesting is that sometimes there's this conflict between people where on the military veteran side, they have this sort of default answer that they can use at any given time to people on the other side. And that is, well, I'm sorry, you just don't understand. You haven't been there. Whereas, and in some ways there's a very much so like a legitimacy to it. Like, for me I'm trying to figure out things like, how do I explain the duality of this feeling of wanting to be involved in contracting, but also knowing that it's not a long-term role. Like, I'm already in the group to some extent, but like, there's this interesting subject that it's almost like it's not an unkept secret. It's like, I don't know how to say it other than sometimes it's just good to be with the boys and going out, and whether the money's there or it's like, it's really good to be back and work, to be working with a group of people who we all have a similar background, or we all have our similarity, where it's like, we just kind of work a different way and focus on the mission, and that's it. And then I come back to the civilian world or the citizen world, and it's aimless and it's empty and it's like vain sometimes. And like, you can definitely find vain dudes in that veil, but I think the veil is a good way of describing it, where you've got people kind of on both sides of this, and we interact quite a bit, but sometimes people on the one side will say, hey, well, you haven't been there, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand what it's like to have that hunger to be like, dude, I'd love to get on a C-130 right now and head over to Afghanistan just to be there for a week for no reason, like, just to be there, and like, okay, to go see this place or go do that thing or work with these people, like, sure. And it's not because of the money or the time. It's like the fulfillment it brings, because I get to see the work of my hands, and it works really well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, people ask me, like, is it the money? Money's part of it, but it's never been
it's good.
about the money. Like, but you will never catch me now going to do like something super dangerous unless there's a high dollar sign attached to it because I've got a family and kids. But
Yes.
if I didn't have a family and kids, no hold bar. Like I'd be like, sign me up. Like let's go do this. Like let's go hit this. Like let's do it.
There's more to the money. There is more to the money than just the fact that it's a dollar sign. Some of it is like when sometimes you can get offered a job that just doesn't like pay well enough.
Yeah,
and,
but it's for a good cause, so you're okay with it.
Yeah, but then you're evaluating on the cause, right? So like it sounds odd, but I guess it sounds kind of odd, but there are times where like I don't know how to say this in any other way. Like a job under a certain dollar sign is just not worth it if it's a job.
Yeah.
Like if it's a job, right? And this is no different in any arena. But in our arena, for whatever reason, it's considered, oh, you're being too good for me. Like, dude, if I'm running $1 million business and you offer me a business opportunity that's going to make me 10 grand, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay. Like, I don't mean to be a dick about it, but like, there are plenty of people in our industry, in our culture, who will take that position.
Yeah.
So do it, but in that relationship is don't lie about what the money is, because I am budgeting that towards something. But I know the money is a subject. I think the hard part that I'm trying to communicate is sometimes I'm going to just make these as generic categories that are not meant to be perfect representations of people, but the best I can do in approximation. Thanks. And one of them is the contractor can say to the civilian and being like, hey, you don't understand. Like there's a cultural reason and there's more to it than I can explain, and you don't understand. And sometimes when that contractor says that, he's doing it wrong because he's making an excuse for something that he doesn't want to explain or can't explain.
Yeah.
Right. So like, or he doesn't want to explain but can explain. Sorry. Or in other words, like sometimes you can use that veil and you can hide behind it, not being honest about what your motivations are, your decisions are, your explanations for something. And at the same time, the person on the other side of the veil, the civilian, the non-participant at this point in time, can hear that the contractor military guy is saying something like, I don't know how to explain it, but I can understand it, and saying, oh, well, you're just not, and they can tell themselves that the person who's telling them that you don't understand is just hiding behind it. It's a bit of an abstraction, but it's an interesting element within our gun culture because sometimes it comes down to teaching stuff, where it's like, dude, I don't really know how to explain. Sometimes it's like, I don't really know how to explain this, but like, if you're getting into night vision and you don't have an illuminator, you're not getting into night vision. You're doing something else, or you're not mission capable. And like, well, what do you mean? Like, I don't really know how to explain it. Sometimes, I'm using this as a generic example, but like, sure, maybe I shouldn't be instructing people on night vision 101 if that's the case. But the point that I'm saying is like, that there's this interesting nature of the relationship between people that you have a statement that can in some ways be a legitimate deference of explanation that will be abused. And then on the other side, you have somebody who isn't in that position who can reject the appropriately used deference of explanation. And so sometimes it has to be that case. Like sometimes people can't explain it to you, and that's just the case of things. And but it behooves the guy on the contracting side not to abuse well, you just can't understand, because we do it all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I see it all the time. Like from the instructor standpoint, is I see instructors that when somebody will ask a question, well, they can't articulate it, or they'll beat around the bush and ignore it, and like to fall back and go backwards to where we were talking about the gun culture and training and everything, and where I stand with it is, if I don't know something, I'll be the first to tell you that I don't know it. If there's something that you ask me that like I don't really want to talk about it, I'll tell you that I don't want to talk. I'm very open and I'm very real about a lot of shit. But like the thing that I see in gun culture right now is that there's so many fake people out there that are riding their coattails of their past, and it's catching up with them. All these Hollywood Instagrammers and instructors that have these huge companies, you can see right now, a lot of them are starting to take heat and a lot of them are starting to fold and fall because people are starting to realize that the weight that they held isn't real. And
Yeah,
that
well,
they faked themselves to this point so far. And now people are starting to realize, like, man, that dude has just been talking out of his ass. And now, like, they see it and they're like, oh my God, like, this is real. And that's why, like, with me and what I do, I'm always going to be 100% straight up with everything. Like, 100%. Like, if I don't know it, I'm going to figure it out. If you ask the question, I'm going to give you the answer to it. But I'm not the best at everything. I'm just good at a bunch of things, and I will help articulate them so that you can also be good at those things. Because like I said, it's all about the why. I can give a shit how to do something. I want to know why you're going to do it. So that's my method when it comes into teaching is anyone can teach you how to shoot. Granddad can teach you how to shoot. Grandmom can teach you how to shoot. Your brother can teach you how to shoot, but they can't explain to you why. And that's what you're getting when you're coming to a Bull Creek class is the why. What muscles you're using, why you're using them, why you're doing this. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've done classes where, like, my practical handgun class is a concealed class. Everywhere in the curriculum it says concealed, show up with a CCW holster, well, and I have guys that show up in fucking cry tuxedos and full belt rigs. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, I don't think I read the email right. And then everyone else is slick wearing jeans and a t-shirt.
Yep.
And that's how me and my instructors like to teach is the practicality behind, like, is it cool to dress up once in a while and wear all that stuff? Of course it is. Is it necessary? Yes, you should understand how to use all your systems. But if you're concealed 90% of the time, why wouldn't you train concealment 90% of the time? Why are you always going to the range with a belt rig? Why are you always going to the range with a plate carrier? Why are you always wearing a helmet and nods during the fucking day?
Because
Like,
all of that equipment carries with it not a stigma, but all of that equipment carries with it an impression of purpose and direction. You don't put on a plate carrier for shits and gigs. You don't put on a shooting belt just because you're going to go do something. Like, that shows not intent, not in a legal sense, but like, I can answer that question because you know what nods communicate two things: authority, which is a weird one, but it is authority, and professionalism, or intent, or not intent in the sense of like a legal sense, but like that shows dedication to the craft or something. Because you're right, and I'm not, and I don't want to beat around the bush on it, but I don't know, and I'm okay with exploring it, but a lot of this stuff, a lot of our culture and the equipment surrounding it, all whispers of capacity, direction, motivation, objectives, and you know, like, and all the, and even the language that we use. And so I don't want to, but like the issue is I don't want to ignore it and just criticize it. Like, yeah, I do spend 99% of my life with a concealed carry handgun, and I better be proficient on it. And every once in a while I catch myself being slacking in that arena, and I know it. I go to the range and I'm like, or I'm in a course or I'm doing something and I'm like, man, my draw time, I am not confident finding this dot, and it behooves me to be better at that. 100%.
Yeah.
And so
if you're good at concealment, it translates. If you're good at covert, it'll translate to being good at overt. But if you're good at overt, it won't translate to being good at covert.
I agree with you there. I do. I absolutely do. And I find it interesting that I don't want to avoid the subject of why that stuff has weight to it. And so when it comes to gun culture, when it comes to, like, you know, kit and gear and preparedness and whatever we're focusing on, yeah, it's easy to get off track and focus on the theatrics and the whatever. But when it comes to those instructors and those Hollywood characters, Here's one example of what I think it comes down to. You look at the difference in Hollywood between Gerard Butler and who's that guy, Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
And I recently watched a recent Gerard Butler film, and he's been around the acting ring for a while.
Yeah.
And he still has not learned how to shoot a gun.
No.
In his movies, he never uses the sights. He's always like, claw, claw, claw. Like, he's always holding it. And maybe it's because he muscle bra, but like,
I think the only movie he actually used it was Den of Thieves.
Nope. I just watched that one. He does not use. He does
it
not
looked like he was. I mean, the scar he wasn't the scar. He was down here, but his handgun he at least had up in his eyeball.
Okay, fine. I'll give you the handgun. But when he was rolling through the cars with that scar, dude, that was like straight Call of Duty, like clack clack clack, and you could see it too because you paused it, and his eye line was here, and his gun line was here, and he was kind of like nerfing it.
50 Cent is literally up on that cheek weld, like muscle.
Yeah, right.
No, I was like, God damn.
Well, and my point is that like the acting level of Gerard Butler is soon going to become unacceptable. Where like he's good at other things, fine, but when it comes to that kind of arena, if you want to be an action hero and you don't know what you're doing, you have set a time limit on your career, and it's you better make your millions and get the hell out now, because the small creators and the small people, and this applies to the gun culture as well, is that like if you've built your career, you've built your reputation on a foundation of sand, it will come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
No one gets away with it.
And these guys are all starting to realize that now.
Fine, but like, so be it. And the flip side to that, the alternative is, if you're in gun culture, don't become so jaded and resentful that everyone who's accomplished something you approach with skepticism and disdain.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's weird because, yeah, sure, there are people out there who have built their reputation on a foundation of sand, and it will come back to haunt them.
Yeah.
But so be it, dude. Like, yeah. I'm not saying you're okay, like, good luck with it, but it will come back to haunt you. I am not afraid of that.
No,
I am not concerned that gun culture will forever be represented by the least of us.
No, like I said, the culture is starting to push back on all that stuff now, where before it was how many followers you had, and if you were a Green Beret or you were this or you were that, and now people are like, I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. Like, I care about the content that you're educational content that you're putting out and how you're actually pushing information,
or the entertainment
about what you're back. Like, people are finally starting to do their due diligence on their instructors to see what they're doing.
I think there's huge. Yeah, I think some of it is the cost of entry is high. Like, you can't just like, taking a course is expensive, so you kind of want to vet it, and I get that too, but also. I think also the other side of it is like that plasticness of it, and the sort of celebrity of it is I see two sides. I see two effects coming into play. One of them is that the people who have built their empires on a foundation of sand, it's starting to give way, and that is by nobody's conscious action. No one's hunting. Nobody's bounty hunting these people, and like,
no, they're
digging up their paths
themselves.
Well, yeah, and it's just like, okay, man. But the other side of it that I'm a little concerned about too is that it's becoming extremely popular to be anti whatever that is, and it kind of like a pendulum. It's like, you cannot tell me. You cannot convince me that there isn't an entire tribe of people that are trying to be a part of gun culture, that their only sole identity piece is their resentment for people who have accomplished more than them. Because you see it in the military too.
Yes.
You see it in the military too. And like, an example of how you would see it in Ranger Battalion is a guy in Ranger Battalion going like, SEAL Team 6 ain't shit. They're just a bunch of yahoos. And you're like, they're criticizing SEAL Team 6 for something. And it's like, hey, I can walk into a room I can see as something at SEAL Team 6 and make a criticism. I can do it. But that cannot come at the cost of the respect of the achievements.
Yeah.
And
100%.
the accomplishments. And that's where I think it's like, watch out, because if that resentment becomes your identity, you're doing the exact same thing. You're building your empire on a house of cards, or you're building a house of cards, and we're gonna go from 1990s 1911 NRA FUD to like vet bro FUD or vet bro, right back to the FUD, and we're gonna like,
and that's I'm not. Like, I'll always give credit where credit's due.
Mm-hmm.
Like always, like listen, you like anybody who went through anything similar or harder than I did, I'll always give you that credit, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a good instructor.
Yeah, I've met guys who are great operators who should not be teaching.
Yes, but
they're fantastic in the field, but like,
yeah.
Or maybe another phrase is teaching is like they've yet to develop their teaching acumen, which I think,
because there's tons of things I know, and like I've had a lot of buddies who hit me up like, hey man, like, can you help me take what's in my brain and put it on paper so that I can project it to students? I was like, yes, because it took me a long time to figure out how to talk to citizens an easier way, whereas like I could stand in front of a group of freaking military or law enforcement or whoever, and I could teach all day, and it's not a problem. But standing in front of a bunch of civilians, they would just stare. Like when I first started teaching, it was like, oh, that didn't work out right, let me fix this. Whereas now I've just learned to be myself. If I'm just Frank going out there and teaching a class, like you're not getting the same class over and over again. Like you're getting the same name, you're just not getting the same content, because I don't have like a bullet point. Like I've got bullet points in my phone that I know, okay, I got to keep on track for this, but like I don't have a verbatim where it's like, boop, hit a button and I just vomit and regurgitate for 8 hours the same information. So like if you take a technique class with me today and you take a technique class with me in 2 weeks, same content, a different delivery and approach is being made, because I go off with the students. I see how the students are working. I see how their skill level is. I see how all that stuff is. And I go off of that. Yeah. So it's always going to be different. And I mean, that's where a good instructor should be, is they should be fluent and be able to change on the fly. They should like what I did with Jake in Virginia, which I would just stop and then I'd look at him and be like, go. And he could pick up on immediately on what I was talking about, and he could finish explaining the process. And I mean, that's what makes an instructor good, is being able to wing it and being able to read people and help people understand things on their level, not your level.
Well, so to be clear,
is I go into classes open.
Yeah, so to be clear on winging it, it's not that you can bullshit your way through a subject. It's that you've spent enough time being proficient at it where you can answer a question in the abstract on demand.
Yes,
where
exactly.
Where it is like, it's not winging it in the sense of, well, I can just stumble, because I've done that before. I've tried to like stumble my way through something, and I look back and I go, that was not an acceptable delivery. But the point you're saying in winging it is that you're proficient enough in the action and its description and its language that even you can take it out of the script and develop the subject. Yeah, I would agree with you there.
And like I said, to me, that is what makes an instructor good. Are there great instructors that can push a button and just keep regurgitating information? Yes. But to me, you're never getting that instructor. You're just getting a machine. Like, they don't know who you are. They're not getting to know you as a person. Whereas, like, if you go up there and you've got your checklist and you kind of go through it and somebody asks you a question and it doesn't pertain to what it is, that instructor who's a robot is going to be like, that's not part of this class. Whereas me, hey, you know what, guys, let's bring it in. Let's talk about what his question just was, even though it has nothing to do with the class that we're teaching.
As long as you can evaluate, like, I would make a point that if there are certain types of questions that a professional or a proficient teacher would be able to listen, hear the question, evaluate it within where its places within the curriculum, and be able to respond appropriately. Because sometimes it's like, you're teaching a handgun class and you're in a handgun 101 and they're like, well, how do you pie a door? And you're like, bro, you can't get it out of the holster. So like, no.
Actually, my practical class, I started changing it. The past 2 classes is there were that question got brought up a ton of like CQB. Well, I'm like, oh god. Well, typically CQB is like a 3-day process. 1 day working fundamentals, the next day working glass house, and then the next day half the day is dry fire, and then live fire in house. There's a ramp of progression. It's not just going to a live fire shoot house and shoot. You're doing basics for 8 hours, and then you're doing glass house for 8 hours and talking about tactics on whiteboards, and then going in and doing dry fire. So my practical class consists of all concealment stuff, but we talk about grip, we talk about trigger manipulation, and then target focus. And then we move into the protective side of things of like doing PSD work, grabbing someone with the left, drawing with your right, going in the front, left or rear. Then somebody was like, well, what about entering a room? I'm like, that's actually a pretty practical application because you live in a fucking house.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so yeah, no, it does. It does.
I started adding one-man room clearing to our practical class, just using with barrels suck. It's really hard to try and do room clearing with a barrel because it's so deep. You can't really explain thresholds well, but I make it work. And
yeah,
we talk about it. And at the end of it, all the students were like, the amount of information that you guys just gave us in a 7-hour period is blowing my mind. Yeah. Because like, you guys talked about fundamentals up to protecting somebody else, which we've never shot around because that's not a normal thing. It's like for us in our world we came from, grabbing someone and shooting around them is normal, but I don't know many other instructors that do it. And that's one of the main things we do in our classes is personal protection with somebody who's with you. Where
you have to do it with a body. Yeah. Yes. You have to figure out. Yeah.
And then, like I said, the whole one-man CQB thing, it's not like I'm teaching you how to enter and clear a room. We're going over 2 to 3 different methods, dancing outside the box of the threshold of 2 foot out the doorway, taking your picture of 180 degrees, and then going into the room. Because you as much as you possibly can, being by yourself before you go in there. And that's kind of what we're doing. And like I said, it's finally made sense to me where students are like, oh, what about coming out of the pocket like theatrics? What about the theatrics? You're by yourself. You need to get as much information out of that doorway as possible before you go in. If your gun's out of your shoulder and you're going into that doorway, can you make a shot out here?
I mean,
theoretically, yeah. What if your wife's on the other side of that doorway held captive from someone? Can you make a shot right there? No, you can't. So when you're by yourself, it changes the complete dynamics of what room clearing should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The complexity of room clearing. I think that let me actually ask you 3 questions then. And this is a really good one. When it comes to like CQB as an instructor and as an individual, what is the hallmark of a professional, someone who's accomplished at it?
What do you mean? Rephrase it.
So like CQB is a skill. CQB is a trendy skill set right now. Yes. So is this idea of like recce, which is just actually wrong.
Yeah.
Like when I love Garand Thumb, but so I love him as in like he's like Mike Jones is a solid guy, and so I'm not going to do the I love it, but it's rather I love Garand Thumb. He's brought forward this idea of recce, and the result of it is that people have confused long range patrolling with reconnaissance.
Mm-hmm.
And they're completely different subjects.
Yes,
I mean, there's a lot of similarity because long range patrolling is like a company or a platoon or an activity that spans days. Recon is a part of that. Yeah, recon is a part of. Yeah. So like recon is an objective to solve a problem or fill an information hole in a larger thing. Long range patrolling is like, how do I do react to contact for like 6 days?
Yeah,
and so. Or like, you know, you're camping and you're moving in your raids and your stuff. So as long as those, this is what I almost did it. I support the Second Amendment, but I loved Garand Thumb, but Mike Jones, holler. But the point is that he brought it. He's talked about he's led the culture in a certain ways of saying like recce's a thing and like people started moving away from the micro rigs to the whatever. And so CQB and Recce are big subjects. And CQB is a subject that will grind people's gears forever.
Yes.
Because
everyone
there's 1,000 ways to skin that cat. But the issue that I'm running, I've been asking and have been asked, thankfully, shout out to John of Method, is what is the mark? What is the thing that separates an amateur versus a professional CQB guy?
I would have to say the ability, I don't put it in words, to look at someone who's a professional, look at somebody who's not, is watching somebody be able to move fluently and slowly through the process while still gaining a complete picture of what's happening. Whereas when you watch guys roll through super fast pace, snapping butt stocks and doing all this crazy stuff, to me, that's all facade. It's all fake. It's all, hey, look at how flashy I am. Whereas when you watch someone super smooth and slow moving through, their gun is up, or they're at the top plate of their optic, rolling through the rooms very efficiently, very fluidly, to me, that would be the sign of a professional.
I can agree with that.
It's not a frantic thing.
That's one thing that I do stand on, is that like you can really tell a guy who's done it well, because when they're moving through the building, there's never a jerkiness to it, which is something that you just have to be able to observe. It's and then the second part of it is that like they can take a 20-inch gun, fit it through an 18-inch doorway, and them in plates, and move through a room without hitting the doorway. And
that's huge. What size gun should I use for CQB? Whatever size gun you have.
No, and I get it. That comes into like a gear question. And yeah, we made guns shorter for a reason, because we were spending a lot of time inside this range, and we wanted to get better. We wanted to be a little bit better at it. So the point being said there is that when you're watching people move through an environment and they're not stumbling and tripping and jerking and launching and moving, that's a good example. I want to push back a little bit on that franticness. Some people who are not good at CQB use speed and jerkiness and snapping around and I don't want to use snapping, because you got to be able to, really, when you're coming through that doorway and you're being able to snap into a good sight picture, if that's what you want to use as a word, that's a good thing. Being able to rotate and engage a target. But the issue that I'm noticing is not all of that is theatrics. Some of it is actually just inexperience. Yeah, when you see it,
but yes, it's theatrics for the point of they saw it somewhere on social media or YouTube, and that's why they think it's the right answer, is because of that. Because like I went through a course last year, and just with one of my buddies who's a Sephardic instructor, and he took my world and flipped it upside down, completely flipped it upside down, to the point where I was like, we just went back to 2006. And he's like, yes. I'm like, why? He's like, why were you doing what you were doing? Like, why was I switching shoulders? Well, when I was contracting, being on a PRE team, a principal recovery team, I wasn't worried about clearing everything. I had to be quickly moving. So like, all right, well, you're near, I'm far. Hit the corner and go around. But like, do I really need to do that? Like, well, no, I guess I don't need to transition shoulders. Like, why would I actually take what I had that was good and give it up? Just move around the turn. Like, if I'm moving quickly and efficiently, I shouldn't have to do that. And the same thing, like going to hit a doorway, coming out and coming in. Like, well, why are you doing that? Well, what if there's a dude there? I want to muzzle thump him. Why? He's like, you don't know that. He's like, if you're already stepping into the doorway, taking that picture, I've already cleared this side. I'm going to go to the unknown now. Just go. Like, you don't have to do all this weird shit.
Don't over exaggerate the breaking down and the compression or the
times where like you'll see me come with the buttstock on the outside of my shoulder. Yeah, I'll do that, but my eyes are still on my reticle. I can still see my reticle and still shoot in the room if I have to. Which I'll get bitched at for that if somebody I know watches this. They'll be like, why are you doing this? Keep the buttstock on your shoulder. And when I'm teaching it, I like see it all the time too, is students will be like, I'll explain the different methods of entering a room, and then I'll show them my way, which is buttstock in your shoulder, driving into the room. You're always in your optic because you're by yourself at this point. This is single man in your home. I'm already taking a big picture and then going in. So what I'm trying to explain to them is you don't need to do any of the other stuff. It's just, if you can do it, watch, and then we'll do it slow. And they're like, I can do that with a 16, 18, or 20-inch gun. It doesn't matter. I don't have to break my shoulder. I always thought I had to break my shoulder to make myself smaller to get to the door frame. Like, I'm 285.
You're not getting smaller, dude.
I'm getting smaller to get to that door frame.
Frank is not... Frank...
Am I
Frank
saying you're wrong? No.
Yeah, Frank is not getting smaller when he's going through that doorway, so good for you.
Am I saying people are wrong for doing that type of stuff? Absolutely not. Because there's guys I know who are quick, but like I said, it was put to me in a very heart-touching moment. Was I went through the doorway, and I was out and came back in and snapped up and took a shot, and a shot timer was on, and all right, now do it again my way. And it took like a half to a quarter second off my time by just keeping my gun up. And he's like, now imagine you coming through that threshold and someone had a gun to your wife's head. Which way do you feel more comfortable taking that shot? Coming in with your gun up, or coming in and snapping your gun up? I was like,
damn. That's a really good idea. Something that I've never seen anybody do is use a shot timer in a shoot house. I've never seen anybody do it. That's a really weird point. I've never seen anybody use a shot timer in a shoot house. Start point, end point, target. Start point, end point, target. Start point, end point, target. Okay, cool. What is the time? Break it down. Do 5 reps of one motion. Break it down. Do 5 reps of another. And it's not. And to be clear, not everything about a shoot house is time. Not everything about CQB is time. It's not everything. Some of it is. It's not always about how fast you can get into a room, or how it's really how quickly and effectively you can identify and neutralize targets. It's really different than just how fast I can hit that target.
And I love it. It's one of the most fun things. It's probably if I could just run a shoot house by myself or with a team, I would do it for hours, all day long. Yeah,
it would. Well, you would end up with a million micro TBIs and a bit of lead poisoning. But hey,
that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with it. Like we said, there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat, and it's my way. And like that's the other thing is, my way is just a way. Are there dudes out there who are better at it than I am? Probably, 100% there are. It's just we're showing you a way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how when you reach a certain place, you start engaging in different ideas of, and being able to like evaluate them better, and being able to engage in the subject and the material and like being able to do it. Actually, this is one I think that does separate the amateur from the professional. Is the amateur can understand the theory behind an action, but the professional can do both of them.
Yes.
I can button hook, I can slow pie, I can fast pie, I can break my rifle down, I can go in with it in my shoulder, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. I can holster and handgun, I can switch all this stuff up, and I can do all of that stuff. So I can like try out. So it makes sense. Well, I have one other question that I want to ask you, but I'm not going to do it because I have a feeling that it's going to be about another 20-minute conversation. And what would be better for me and my empire is to ask you to come back on the show.
100%. Yeah, we could definitely do that because I know you and me could talk for hours about stuff. But with that, sorry, no, go ahead.
So then what I want to close on is that one of the things that you and I were talking about, and one of the things that we've been talking about on the show quite a bit is like the gun culture for the boys, doing stuff, getting out of the house, spending time with people. It's been like culture building and how we do it. And you and I live on opposite sides of the country, so we should get together sometime soon.
December 3rd or 4th, I'll be in Phoenix.
What?
Yeah.
3rd and 4th?
Yep.
Oh, after the show, let's talk more details. Because I want to have a chit chat with you.
Yeah, RX Range Day.
All right, cool.
Yeah, December 4th. So Phoenix people will be in Arizona December 4th. It was a Sunday, but it'll be an all-day affair where there's 3 different instructors, myself, Achilles Heel, and First Line Defense. or first defense.
I'll swing by if I have time and things work
Mark,
out
I'm
right.
so sorry.
Mark?
Shit.
Oh, you forgot the name of his company?
Yeah. No, it's first. Yeah, it's first defense. Man, shit.
Well, just it's gun tactical. We're good.
Embarrassing. Fuck, I'm so sorry, Mark.
RX Range Day.
RX Range Day, December 4th in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona.
Is there a website?
60. Yeah, it's if you just it's on Achilles Heel website, but it's just RX Range Day. If you Google RX Range Day, it'll pop up. Basically, there's 60 applicants can submit, and I think there's like 30 that get selected or something like that. Like,
applications are live. Only 200 applications will be accepted, and only 60 attendees will be selected. It's an RX Range Day between Achilles Heel, your prescribed Range Day, RX Range Day, Utah. Mark Achenbach, First Defense USA.
First Defense, I was right. All right, sweet.
Rick Crawley, Achilles Heel Tactical, and you from Bull Creek Strategic. Yeah, alrighty, cool. Well, I will probably swing by. It's I've recently met some of the people from CGS.
Yeah, and so it's a solid event, man, because like you're getting sponsors out there, so you're getting to see product, and then we go on the range with us instructors, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a low light class too. So it's going to be
cool.
4 or 5 hours of daylight and then low light.
Well, that's all, and as the world forays into more and more night vision focus, I look forward to that. And we could probably use that alone as like a follow-on topic.
And what we do is if you do show up to RX and you have night vision, we will pull you, and myself or one of the other instructors who are keen on it will take you to the side, and we'll run a different class just for nods. And then you'll have a bunch of white light stuff. So if you do have nods, you show up, you can actually just do the night portion with nods.
Night Vision Incorporated is working on a nod solution for the culture, so I want to keep up tabs on that one. But we won't reveal all of the secrets. Alrighty, cool, Frank. Well, the last thing that I was going to say is, if you got a message for the boys, you got a message for the people who are out there still listening. What that goes to, like, whether it's dad advice, whether it's gun culture advice, whether it's like, carry the fire, keep the torch. What do you got what do you have for the listeners?
Man, I mean, if you can't be safe, be dangerous.
Fair. I'm good with that one. The cult of safety is real. Let it die in darkness.
May the bridges I burn light my way. No.
Ooh, that's is that like a lyric?
Probably is. I think
probably
made like a shirt with it and a bunch.
It's probably
lyrics or something.
It's probably some angry angst metal. But all right, cool. Where do people find you? How do they find you? How do you want people to follow you? How do you want people not to follow you? What's your
BullCreekStrategic.com, Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then Escarpment Arms, which we could talk about the next time we come on. That's my gun store where we do custom Cerakote and stuff like that. But also on Google, Escarpment Arms. But if anybody ever has questions about anything and you watch this, by all means, do not hesitate to reach out to me on any platform. Typically, Instagram's an easier platform to respond to DMs on than everything else is. So
Instagram seems to be the easiest. Yeah.
If you got questions, by all means, hit me up on there, and I'll do the best I can to answer them, because that's literally what we're here for, is to try and help people better themselves, whether it's life, shooting, fitness, whatever it is. We all want to be a better version of ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast. Today, I'm joined by Frank Bito. You're one of the good ones, at least for now, unless your evaluation comes up and we decide to change your mind. But thank you for representing more dudes with beards, and we will talk to you soon. This has been the Redacted Culture Cast. Thank you for your support. If you want to head over to redactedllc.com, that's where you can pick up merch to keep this page rolling as we participate in actually building culture. So, well, actually, now I'm a meme.